Hi everyone, let's go ahead and get started with some multiplying polynomials. Again, parentheses are important. Those parentheses, when two parentheses are touching, they tell us that we are multiplying. If we only have a number in front of the parentheses, then that's tell us that we're still multiplying, but I don't need to put parentheses around that monomial up front. Could I put parentheses around 4x? Absolutely. If you feel more comfortable with that, I would suggest doing that. So let's go ahead on this one. If I'm taking 4x times x squared plus 3x minus 2. We also looked at it as in class. We said, what if we place these in boxes? So it kind of helps us to identify the different terms. So if you remember that, we did that as well. So 4x times x squared gives me 4x to the third, because when we're multiplying, we are adding the exponents. Multiplying polynomials add the exponents. 4x times positive 3x gives me positive 12, and x times x will give me x squared. 4x times negative 2 will give me negative 8x. Okay? All right, now that's one of them. I put another example for you to try just right underneath, so go ahead and try that one. All right, this one here, I've written the example 2 times, the same one, because I'm going to show you how we did this with 2 different methods. I'm going to show you how we did it in class with the area model, and then what we talked about with distribution. Okay, so same problem, you'll see it 2 different ways, and you'll see the answer comes out exactly the same. So with the area model, I have a binomial times a binomial. A bicycle has 2 wheels. A binomial polynomial has 2 terms. So area model, I'm going to go ahead and make a box. Box is going to have 2 rows with 2 columns. And I'm going to go ahead, and I said that backwards, but 2 rows across, 2 columns up and down. X minus 2, my first binomial, I put it off to the left side. The second binomial, I put the terms on top, so 2x minus 4. Now, in this first box here, I am going to have 2x times x. So that's going to give me 2x squared. Then in the second box over here, I'm going to do x minus 4, and that gives me negative 4x. In the bottom left box, I'm going to take negative 2 times the 2x on top, and that's going to give me negative 4x. Then I'm going to do negative 2 times negative 4, and that's going to give me positive 8. Now, with the area model, I can look and see there's only one term that has x squared. There's one term that has no x's, and then there's 2 terms that both have an x. So these 2 here, we're going to practice like we were doing with adding and subtracting, and we're going to combine those like terms because they both have an x. Same variable, no x squared, so we can combine them. So on this one here, I will get 2x squared as my leading term. Then I will have negative 4, and negative 4 gives me negative 8x. And then my constant term is positive 8. Okay, so that's using area model. Now, if you prefer distribution, let's go ahead and do one of those. So with distribution, I'm going to take x times 2x, and I have 2x squared, x times negative 4, which gives me negative 4x, negative 2 times 2x gives me negative 4x, and negative 2 times negative 4 gives me positive 8. Again, here's my 2 terms that were like terms. So I will have 2x squared minus 8x plus 8. Essentially, these are the same thing. It's just that their appearance initially looks a little different. Okay? So those same 4 numbers that we have here are the same 4 numbers that we had inside the area model. All right? Again, it's preference. Which method do you prefer? And that's the one that you work with. Okay? All right. So let's do that again, but now instead of doing a binomial times a binomial, I'm going to do a binomial times a trinomial, doing it with both forms again. So let's start with the area model on this one. So I have 2 terms in my first polynomial, 3 terms in the second polynomial. So I'm going to draw a rectangle. It's going to have 2 rows and 3 columns. So I have 4x plus 3. Then I have x squared minus 3x minus 5. Okay, in this top left box, 4x times x squared gives me 4x to the third. Then I have 4x times negative 3x gives me negative 12x squared. Then I've got 4x times negative 5 gives me negative 20x. Now let's go ahead and work with that bottom row. So 3 times x squared gives me 3x squared. 3 times negative 3x gives me negative 9x. And 3 times negative 5 gives me negative 15. Now, I only have one term that has x cubed, or x to the third. So my first term, my leading term, is going to be 4x to the third. I have 2 terms that have x squared, 3x squared and negative 12x squared. So 3 minus 12 gives me negative 9x squared. I have 2 terms that have x. I have negative 9 and negative 20. So that's going to give me negative 29x. And then my last term is my constant term. It's only one of those. Will be negative 15. Right? Now that's using the area model. So let's go look at this with distribution. Again, essentially the same thing. It's just a few more lines that we have to draw. Okay? All right. So I'll try to leave that answer there so we can compare them. And let's go ahead and work with that one. So I have 4x times x squared gives me 4x to the third. Remember that we add the exponents when we're multiplying, and this one has an exponent of 1. 4x times negative 3x gives me negative 12x squared. 4x times negative 5 gives me negative 20x. 3 times x squared is positive 3x squared. 3 times negative 3x is negative 9x. And 3 times negative 5 gives me negative 15. Now, I'm going to write this out so that they're paired up again, just so you see what I'm talking about. So I have one of them that has x to the third. So that one's going to go first. 4x to the third. I have 2 of them that have x squared. Negative 12x squared and positive 3x squared. Then I have 2 terms that just have a single x. So negative 20x, negative 9x, and then the constant term, negative 15. So simplifying that by combining like terms, negative 12 plus 3 is negative 9, and then x squared. Negative 20 and negative 9 is negative 29x, and then minus 15. Okay, again, coming up with that same solution, that same expression. It just depends on which way do you prefer to look at and organize that information. All right, so let's go on to one more. One more of these is going to be multiplying a trinomial to a trinomial. Now, I will be honest with you on this one. I actually prefer the area model because otherwise there's too many lines, but let's work with it. So we've got 3 rows on this one, and we've got 3 columns. All right, so off to the left side, x squared plus 3x minus 2. Off to the top, negative x squared minus x plus 4. Okay, so x squared times negative x gives me negative x to the fourth. X squared times negative x gives me negative x to the third. X squared times 4 gives me positive 4x squared. Okay, now multiplying 3x. 3x times negative x squared gives me negative 3x to the third. 3x times negative x gives me negative 3x squared. And 3x times 4 gives me positive 12x. Lastly, on my last row, I've got negative 2 times negative x squared gives me positive 2x squared. Because that negative times a negative makes it that positive, negative 2 times negative x gives me positive 2x. And negative 2 times positive 4 gives me negative 8. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and look at just the ones that have x to the fourth. That's going to be in that top left corner. So I have negative x to the fourth. Then the ones that have x to the third, I have negative 3 and negative 1. That gives me negative 4 x to the third. Now doing my x squareds, I have positive 2, negative 3, and positive 4. So 2 plus 4 is 6, minus 3 is positive 3x squared. And then with the x's, I have 2 and 12. That's positive 14x. And then my constant, negative 8. Okay, that's using the area model. Let's go ahead then and do that with distribution. Again, you'll want to have a pencil when you're doing this because there's just going to be a lot of lines here. All right, so I've got x squared times negative x squared gives me negative x to the fourth. X squared times negative x gives me negative x to the third. X squared times 4 gives me positive 4x squared. Okay, now let's do 3x times negative x. That gives me negative 3x to the third. 3x times negative x gives me negative 3x squared. And then 3x times 4 gives me positive 12x. Okay, this last one, negative 2 times negative x squared gives me positive 2x squared. Zoom out just a tad here. And then, negative 2 times negative x gives me positive 2x. And then negative 2 times positive 4 gives me negative 8. Okay, so we have 9 terms written here. We got to go gather them up. So only one of them has a variable of x to the fourth. Then I've got negative x to the third. Then I have negative 3x to the third. And then, that's it for x to the thirds. Then I have positive 4x squared. Then I have negative 3x squared. And positive 2x squared. And then we have positive 12x, positive 2x, and then our constant term, negative 8. Okay, now going ahead and simplifying this, negative x to the fourth, negative 4x to the third, 4 plus 2 minus 3 gives me 4 plus 2 is 6, minus 3 gives me positive 3x. 12x plus 2x is positive 14x, and negative 8. Okay, so comparing our solutions, our simplified expressions, they are the same. Again, it's just which one makes sense in your head, and that's the one I want you to practice with, okay? All right, here are some examples for you to try. If you have any questions or any of that you want to go over, please let me know. And in the next couple of videos, I'm actually going to get towards factoring, which is the opposite of distribution. So instead of multiplying, we are dividing.